Okay. Well, welcome everybody. After approving the minutes from the 1st of April, I'll go ahead and turn things over to Beth to give us an update on the LTI authorities that were brought in.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm still working on authorities. Brought in most of the subject authority records, and right now I'm bringing in name authority records. What's slowing down the process a little bit is the fact that as I'm bringing them in, I'm also removing duplicates. So we're getting the authorities all cleaned up, and hopefully at the end of this project, we'll have all the duplicates gone. Once those duplicates are gone and once the authority records have all been overlaid, I will be updating the links that are in the bibliographic records as well. So, ongoing project.
Thank you. And I don't know anybody that doesn't like clean authorities. It sure is super helpful when I'm doing my cataloging. I have to apologize. I forgot to mention, Beth, in my LOC authorities training, sorry folks, I'm battling throat issues at the moment, but I forgot to mention the right click to get to the Library of Congress authorities when you're working in the cataloging module. We went through the Library of Congress website and the other authorities that we use and all of that, but I didn't go over the right clicking and then realized that after I was done. So I think most folks are aware of that though. So
yeah, that is something we could point out that's different in the web client though. Rather than right clicking, you have to click on an icon. So we could feature that when we go over the web client.
yeah, that's true. That's a good point. I'd forgotten about that. Okay, well, as you know, our latest huge project was clarifying how we catalog series and how we enter series information into our bib records. And so if anybody hasn't gotten a hold of the document yet, first of all, shame on you. No. It's over here in cataloging in our series guidelines that we've had out for a few months. Pretty comprehensive document. Please use it as a reference. What I find especially helpful about it are these special cases that you'll see down here. Anna, of course, goes over all of the syntax that we use in MARC for entering series information, but where it gets really tricky are these occasional occurrences of, well, they're all right here towards the end. Right here, split series, items included in more than one series, series title change. Thankfully, we don't see those too often, but they do happen. And that was one of the reasons why we decided to put together some clarification for this. But in reading through or in your cataloging series experiences in the last few months, has anybody come across anything that was confusing or that they had a question about or concerns about, or any particular series they wanted to look at? We wanted just to leave a little bit of time for any feedback that folks had, not just on documentation, but general series issues or questions. If you ever come across these, of course, you can always talk to me or talk to your mentor if you have something that comes up. But anyone, anywhere want to bring anything up? If not, we can continue on, but I did want to leave that opportunity open for anybody.
John, I think you should share with everyone the cleanup project you did, you and Heather helping.
Sure.
Getting that series stuff, and that just that what a discovery it was for the Cat2 cataloger to realize how complicated it is, and we don't belabor the series issue out of some kind of arrogance. They really are complicated.
They certainly are. I'll bring this up really quickly, just so you can see. Of course, now it's nice and clean, and you'll see what we want to see. It's the Cedar Cove series by Debbie Macomber. Now, originally this series had a bunch of different series information down here. You can see here that we now have all of them in a uniform SAGE authority. There were actually 2 Library of Congress authorized headings for this series, so we had to pick one. Across a variety of different media here. And so we had a Cat2 cataloger volunteer to take this on with some one-on-one training, and she did a remarkable job. And not only was it a learning experience for her, but also for Heather and I, who were going over this project with her. But phase 1 was finding all the existing series information that was there. This is not really helpful, is it? Let me make this full screen. Finding all the existing series information that was there and unifying it and clarifying, tidying it up, making sure all of the spacing, punctuation, terminology was correct. I'll go into one of these. And then also phase 2 of it was going through the rest of the catalog and finding books that the catalog does not say are in this series and adding that series information. So that now we can see our 490 field there and our 800 field here. And quite a few records in this series, 71 records in this particular series. It does have a spin-off, of course. Every good series has a spin-off, right? And so I think she might be open to taking that on, but it really, really helps to be thorough when you are adding series information, and when you find series that are a mess, what we are going to be doing, we haven't implemented this yet, but on the SAGE website, I believe there's mention of it in the series documentation somewhere, but we're going to have a contact form here somewhere where if you encounter one of these series that after doing your work on it and adding your items, and you find a series that you don't know how to approach or that has multiple authorities and you're not sure which one to use, we're going to have a contact form that you can submit, and we would be happy as mentors to look at it with you, and because instead of just emailing your mentor, which is fine, but it would be good to have a collective resource where we can use that information from all of the catalogers and compile that so that we can keep our cataloging consistent series-wise. Because we all know that there are particular types of series that just don't fit in any kind of rules and can be super confusing. And so we have some really talented people on the mentor committee that are really experienced with series. I deal mostly with nonfiction, so I do not count myself as one of those. But that is coming soon, and I just wanted to make you all aware that that is coming. So for those of you that feel absolutely lost when it comes to encountering series, there is help, and it is available You just need to communicate that to us. Anybody else have anything else on series? Aren't they fun? Tons of fun. Especially graphic and manga. Any Brave Souls catalog graphic manga series out there? Okay, let's go ahead and move on to our next Evergreen update, which hasn't been set in concrete yet, but we're looking at late fall, early winter for our next Evergreen update. And this is the big one, folks. This is the nuclear update, because after this, we will not have access to our staff client anymore. Well, you'll have access to it, but it won't do anything for you. So, we want to, yeah, go ahead, Beth.
I was just going to say, it'll be a web client. It'll still be a staff client. It just won't be on your desktop. It'll be on the web.
Right.
So through the web browser. Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially a staff client on the web that you will not have locally on your computer anymore. And it is quite a bit different, as some of us have discovered. So, like I said, we don't have a hard and fast date for that yet. We'll have more information as we go, but we really want to prioritize here on the committee helping folks get up to speed on the web client if they have questions or concerns. There are some issues currently that we really haven't resolved yet, and we aren't going to, there isn't really any kind of quick fix until we do this update. One of them, as you all have noticed, is probably, or as you probably have noticed, is printing. Has the circulation, well, I don't know when the circulation committee has last met. Beth, have they talked about web client at all and printing and?
No, they haven't met. We have a chair now, so we're planning on getting a meeting together soon. And web client will be a big part of that. I did learn some things at the conference about printing, so hopefully we can resolve some of the issues folks are having. But most of the time printing works okay. We've just had some issues with places that have multiple printers and want to print different things to different printers, and using Hatch and things like that that have been problematic. But I think as we use the web client more, we'll be able to figure some of those out.
Yeah, our experience here has been we are able to do our hold slips and transit slips. There isn't anything really we haven't been able to do functionally. It's just we'll need to have the ability to edit our templates and get those all straightened away like we were before. And will we have the ability to do that the way we did before, or it's going to be different, or do we know yet?
Are you talking about the receipt templates?
Yeah, specifically receipt templates.
Yeah, there is a whole new set of default templates that we can start with, and that'll kind of be more probably circulation related. But yes, there are some things we can be doing to make life better.
Mm-hmm. So for those of you that we're going to say, hey, printing is not up to speed yet. Yes, we know. We're well aware of that. And but anyway, we thought we'd go over just a couple more things in the web client for you today. And of course, if anybody has anything that has been bugging them specifically, please holler away. One thing that John George showed me was down here. I now have the character map in my taskbar because accessing those special characters are a little bit different in the web client. And so for now, The way I used to do it was with Control S, I think, brought up the special characters, but I have all of them here, and there's my copyright one that I then can copy to the clipboard and use, and then phonograph is down here somewhere too. But if you're having issues getting your special characters in cataloging, we did discover where this was, if you want to pin it to your taskbar. Now, if you're expecting me to remember where this was, anyone, was it under accessories? Character map, there it is, right there.
And if you type in character map in the Windows search box, it will locate it for you.
Which is where? I'm a Mac person, Beth. Help me out. Oh, right here. Search bar right there. Character map. Just like that. Let's see. Item templates. This is a little bit different than in the staff client. Let me find one of ours. That's one of ours. And you'll notice that instead of having a menu off to the right side where we would get to a lot of these screens, they are now tabs across the top here. And whereas we would get to holdings maintenance in the menu, now it's over here called holdings view. I don't know if this is how many of you get to editing your items or not, but I'm going to grab ours right here. And then I'm going to right click. And I'm going to go over here to edit. I can edit volumes, copies, or volumes and copies. I tend to do volumes and copies. And this screen looks a little bit different. If I'm going to enter my volume information, it's up here with my call number here and my barcode, copy, part information there. I can add volumes here and copies if I want. And then if I'm editing the individual copies, I'm going to make this full screen for a second. Here are my item attributes. And so the issue that was brought up in the mentors meeting was, where are my defaults? And how do I edit those? And if I go up here to edit copy templates defaults, I go up here to my copy templates tab, and I can edit any of my templates here. And one issue that I think, Dia, was it you that brought this up, is that sometimes certain attributes here do not save correctly to the template, and so they don't change as they are supposed to.
No, they don't always populate down below. They save, right, but they don't always populate. Before you move from there, though, you might show, if you want to create a new template that is not here, you start without having one listed in the templates there. And I don't know if you can create from now or if you have to come back in and start over. But if there's nothing in that name box, you just start populating your template like you want it. And then you click, can't remember if you click save or you start writing and then click save. But it's not very intuitive how you create one.
Let me get out of here and go back in. Edit volumes and copies, or I can add copies here too. But I'll do it the same way, volumes and copies. And then I'll come up here to my copy templates, and there's nothing here. So I will just call this test for the time being. I want it to circulate. Yeah, sure, why not? And we'll circulate it here. I'll just change a couple of these. We'll put it in new fiction. And I want it to be a book. And I want it to circulate as a book. Do I want it holdable? Sure. How much is it? $1,500. That sounds like a good price. Why not? And we'll put it in process. No, it's not reference. Yes, I see it in the OPAC.
Can I give you a quick thing that I found?
Sure.
If you set that status here,
mm-hmm.
It's going to always change it. So be aware that if you do any pre-cat type stuff and you go to transfer it in and then you populate your template down below, it's going to change that. So if it's checked out currently, for instance, when you're in that process or anything else, it's going to try to override that. So just be aware. You might want to leave that one without putting anything in your template and take it as in process, if that's, because that's what it's going to come up as a default.
Right. So for as a
just something I learned by error.
By editing, so you're talking about something that is already in the system, and
yes, like as a pre-cat or something.
Right. Okay.
So just be aware of that. I know not everybody does pre-cats, but just thought I'd give it as a tip.
So let me try to save this. Here, I'm going to click Save as my test template. And then I'm going to go over here to Edit Screen. And I may have to come back out. I'm not sure if Test is going to be in here. Oh, there it is. Test. And I'm going to click Apply, and maybe some of these things will change. That changed, that changed, that changed. Everything else I think was as it was already. Okay, now I am going to get out of here and not save it so that this book doesn't end up costing somebody $1,500 when they lose it. So anyway, we're going to have more trainings on web client issues and kind of target them for catalogers, stuff that catalogers do specifically. That's just one example of something we thought we'd bring up. And just like with series, if anybody else would like to bring up something they've been struggling with or confused about, please holler away. I will bring up, where is your blog, Beth? Is it on the home page? No, it's over here where it says blog. If you haven't set up your web client yet and are wondering where to start, this is where you would want to go. She's written out how to get started using the web client, how to register your workstation. And that's here on the Sage website under the blog tab. Anyone else? Any comments, concerns, frustrations, revelations, helpful tips and tricks you found in the web client that you'd like to bring up? We haven't set a date for our next web client training, but Beth, correct me if I'm wrong, was the intent to do more kind of short-ish type videos targeting specific things for folks to look at for training-wise instead of a big, long training session? Am I remembering correctly?
You are. My thought was that would be more useful long term for folks that just wanted to have a quick introduction to a particular feature. Also allow it to be more flexible because it is the trainings that we have done have been useful, but they're long to sit through. Typically an hour, hour and a half, and so I'd like to put together some shorter videos.
Yeah, I know that would be helpful for me when there's one thing that I can't remember how to do. How do I do that? And then I can just find that particular video instead of trying to remember, oh, it was 27 minutes in the hour-long video. So, speaking of YouTube videos, we're going to do some reorganization, not just on the YouTube page, but on the Sage website in general, to see if we can't kind of streamline where our resources are, and because you can see they're getting quite long here. And so I'm not sure what our time frame is for that, but it's on the list of things to do. Beth, did you want me to bring up this SC Lens page over here? I'm trying to remember what we had talked about, just as an example of different ways to put together resources. Or
yeah, I think there was some talk of using some of the resources that they have on their pages, creating links on our site as well, just for helpful information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've seen this type of system used prior. When I was in Southern California, we would put these together, research guides at the university for any specific topic. So it makes sense that we could use a format like this for us as well. Oh, by the way, if you've never seen this book, the RDA workbook, this book was so helpful to me when I was just first starting here. It's short, it's very intuitive. If you want something to help you make the transformation from, or the transition, not the transformation, from AACR2 to RDA, I highly recommend this book right here, RDA workbook. Super helpful. Anyway, I have my copy. I don't know if it's in our system or not. I should probably catalog it, put it in our system, and then any of y'all can borrow it. So just to let you know let you know a couple of things that we're going to be looking at in the future. We haven't started these projects yet. I'll actually talk about Library of Things first. Not sure how many libraries out there have Library of Things in their collections. Hood River just did a big one. We have kind of a small-ish Library of Things in our collection, and it's a little bit of a challenge because there are some different circulation quirks on these types of things. They're mostly objects of some kind, realia or objects that will circulate differently than a regular collection of books or documents or magazines. And so right now we're trying to, based on the physical collections that we have, kind of develop some protocol for how we want to add these types of collections in the future, what the terminology we want to use for them. We've added another 999 term for these. Let me bring up Hood River's collection. The question is, how do I find it? Is it here in Library of Things? Yes, in item type. Now, as I recall, this is a subfield. This is subfield F.
Yes, it is.
In 999, not subfield E like we normally use.
Correct. Yeah.
So I'll do just a blank Library of Things search here. And I'll kind of show you all kinds of fun things here. Vacuum sealer, canning kit, 20-cup food processor. Now these items, as I'm trying to remember how they wanted to do this, these items only circulate at that particular library, right? But they wanted it to be holdable and in the catalog and all of that stuff. Item can be picked up and returned. Item can only be picked up and returned to the Hood River branch, no renewal. As we look at the MARC record, we see some differences here. our 3x fields, three-dimensional form, and we use object for the carrier. I'll go down a little further, and you can see here in the 999 field, it gets into that item type here based on subfield F, which we used to use for everything, but we're not using it currently for anything but this library of things. And so you'll see some different subfield E's, like equipment, like kit, and we actually have one for Realia object. I don't know if I can find an example of that right here. They have one of them in their collection.
And this is part of what we're going to be discussing as to how often we should use the Realia object. Should that be the default? And so, yeah, we've got some ongoing discussion to happen.
That is the R in the type fixed field here, three-dimensional artifact or naturally occurring object. And then you can see the subfield E Realia object there. So we'll be discussing maybe putting together some documentation on how to put together these collections. The tricky thing, of course, is dealing with objects. Each collection is so different that it's kind of hard to make a one-size-fits-all procedure protocol for these types of collections. I know that Hood River's Library of Things collection is completely different than ours. We have stuff like, a Frisbee golf set, and we have a USB turntable, and what else do we have? I think we have a telescope in there maybe. So that'll be interesting to see how that develops. Subject headings. So what we're going to do is we're not going to approach this subject headings project the same way that we approach the series project. Series, we wanted to come up with something fairly comprehensive so that we could tackle some of these more unique, difficult situations you would find with series. But for subject headings, we really want to kind of pick just a couple, 2 or 3 different recurring issues that are kind of driving all of us crazy. One of them being redundancy in subject headings. Okay, I'm finding all kinds of subject headings that pretty much are saying the same thing. Do I need all of them? What do I need to take out? What needs to stay? That type thing. That's one issue. How do we deal with faceted subject headings? That's the FAST FAST subject headings thesaurus, which is built on the Library of Congress subject headings thesaurus, but not really. What do we want to do with that? And so as we begin to think of this project over the next few months, the mentor committee definitely wants to hear from everybody frustrations, confusion, things about subject headings that they find difficult, and things that they come across on a regular basis. Those are the type of things that we want to kind of tackle with this subject headings project. So be thinking of that. And if there's something you want to bring up now, or if there's something that you think of later, please make a note of that and let your mentor know or let me know, so that we can kind of come up with some goals, specific goals that we want this subject headings process to address. Anybody have any questions on Library of Things or on subject headings?
Related to subject headings, John, I'm looking forward to seeing the committee's advice on preferred source for subject heading. So if we are removing duplicates, we know what the preferred selection for source is. And also I want to make sure that we emphasize, I think we're supposed to leave BISAC in, even if not many of us are currently using that. Is that correct?
There is, I haven't gone through all of our current SAGE documentation talking about BISAC, but there is verbiage probably on both sides of the issue. I know I have verbiage that says to take it out. I don't know if that's the 2014 or 2015, whenever that was, revisions. But there's probably documentation also that says to leave it in. So I've got, where's my purple folder? I can actually look it up. I don't know if I have any electronic copy of this to show you all. I probably do, but I would have to hunt for it.
John, I recall some of the history on that one, and I do know that for a while, I think David Sales was teaching some of the areas to remove those. And then in discussion among the general library group, that was not desirable. We said that they should remain in and they should be imported whenever possible. So I guess we still have to determine, currently, I kind of think that they will be asked to leave them in. The other thing, of course, is juvenile, and whether we do the separate juvenile source code. I still think since we went without that for so long, I think now that we're keeping the second indicator 1 for juvenile, I feel like we're only going to have a partial collection as a result of that. And then third thing that I've noticed is I hate all the extra authority, the authority links at the end of subject fields, when especially when you import from OCLC and you get those OCLC strings of authority record. And I think we have to also discuss whether we should start removing those, or if there's any way to have those dropped upon importing records. So those are 3 things I've thought of.
Yeah, all things that we need to discuss and figure out. And I mean, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and find all of the literature that we have, and I'll present it, and we'll kind of weed out what's obsolete and what isn't. That did remind me, though, there is something coming down the pike in current practice, and that is a new thesaurus of, well, it's not really new, but it is ongoing, of demographic groups. And this is in the Mark 385 and 386 field. And Beth just went to a lecture on it, right? At the didn't OLA have something on this?
They did, yes. Yeah, so I'm going to be sharing those slideshows with the cataloging community in SAGE, and I'd like to see us start using those, so I figured we would do a training on those new tags as well.
I think it's going to be very helpful in addressing some of the issues we have that we've been kind of using in other places that maybe don't necessarily belong there. I also am looking forward to it addressing some of our local subject headings that we've had to use. For example, one of the mark fields is for the demographic group characteristics of the creator. So, for example, our local Oregon author field that we use conveys that same information within that, I forget whether it's 385 or 386, that demographic group of the author. So not only Oregon author, which I believe the term is Oregonians, but any other specific characteristics according to the thesaurus, that information can be recorded. The other field is for audience groups. So, for example, young adult fiction, juvenile fiction, juvenile literature, that type of information that we now have as either a form subheading, subfield V, juvenile fiction, juvenile literature, or, as Lori mentioned, the additional subject heading with the second indicator 1. It seems silly to me and that we have to have a completely duplicate subject heading just to convey that information. So I don't know if this avenue will allow us to convey that information and get it in the OPAC in a way that patrons can see it better than currently. That's my hope. I don't know. It's still being developed at this point. But like Beth said, we can definitely have a training on it, kind of introduce it, show you where the thesaurus, thesauri, actually it's one thesaurus, isn't it? Thesaurus, where it is, so that you can start becoming familiar with those terms. And so don't be surprised if you start seeing some of these when you're importing records, 385s and 386, demographic groups, audience information, as well as creator information. If you see them, leave them there. Don't delete them out. And thankfully, they don't have all of these crazy strings on them. I think they just have a subfield 2 LCDGT, I think, Library of Congress Demographic Groups Thesaurus. That's the tag, the authority tag that you would see on there. That will be a huge project. I'm trying to limit the scope of it as much as I can, actually, so that it doesn't become something as huge as series is, although subject headings certainly have a critical importance to our catalog and to our patrons.
So, Beth and John, would you foresee that as something that we would actually have to do a cleanup at some point, or is that just something that for ongoing practices we will gradually move toward using this?
I think at least initially, like John said, that the scope of it is pretty staggering when you think about, okay, all the works by William Shakespeare, and if we want to put all of the information about him as a creator, we could do a batch update on all the records that he has in the system. So there's some backdating we can do. I guess what I'm hoping for initially is that we get familiar with these tags, start using them, and then we can look at possibly backporting these tags into older records.
Because it would be one of those things that would be useful for like Oregon authors and young adults specifically that have different stuff.
Yeah, and some of that we might be able to, group the records into a batch and say, okay, add this tag to all these records. So some of that could certainly be done. We just have to be able to get familiar with the tags, identify what we want to do as a project, and then get it started.
There is a concern that I have with this, and I don't know how concerned I should be or not, and that is when the cataloger is put into a position to make a subjective decision, because when you are the one deciding who the audience is, that kind of opens up a can of worms, right? We may think, and I'm not talking about necessarily age level, although I suppose that could be a factor, juvenile versus young adult, but if there are also a lot of other different terms in this thesaurus for demographic groups. So for example, we say, oh, this is a book maybe that is targeted, the audience is for maybe lower income folks, for example. I get a little worried in that may not be our decision to make. Or, for example, maybe we put in something that this is targeted for an LGBTQ audience, for example. While that might certainly be appropriate, was that the author's intent to limit it in that way? Perhaps it was, perhaps it wasn't. So it kind of opens up a series of questions, and it'll be interesting to see how the debate goes and how this ends up being used in the future, and what different libraries end up doing, and the protocols that the Library of Congress establishes to implement this. They do have a page going for it. I apologize, I don't have it off the top of my head. Thesaurus, Library of Congress, demographic groups. I think that's what it is. Is this the page? I think this is the page. Here's the introduction. Here's the terms. There's the manual, at least as it is so far. Assignment of terms, audience characteristics, assignment of terms, creator and contributor characteristics, educational level category, ethnic cultural category, gender category. Boy, can anybody else see how this could cause some issues in the future? I don't know.
Just a few.
Just a few. Yeah, we may have some differences of opinion, but all arguments, hopefully, that they will all have, and they will all figure it out, and then it will be perfectly linear for us to use. In the meantime, like Beth said, I think our best approach is to kind of look at some targeted places where we can use this, where it may be excuse me, where it may be confusing in other areas, and we can just do some quick batch editing and clean some of that up. Not necessarily that we want catalogers for every book they do having to come up with a creator and audience demographic group for their items. I don't think that's the intent. I hope that's not the intent. Okay. Anybody else have any? Oh, Lori just put it in the chat here. Let me open up your page here, Lori. 385 audience characteristics, and then 386 must be creator characteristics. For which a resource is intended, or a category of persons representing the intellectual level for which the content of a resource is considered appropriate. Who gets to consider it appropriate is my question. So you got some examples here: children, painters, HIV long-term survivors, HIV positive persons. So anyway, that will be coming down the pike later on.
As if we thought the whole idea of setting audience level didn't create some issues for catalogers. Let's compound it.
Yep. I can't wait to see the fireworks that result. So anyway, actors, LCSH.
You know, philosophically, it's all interesting, but I believe it's a ways away for us. We still haven't formally adopted RDA. And I'm still struggling with, we have one, sometimes two catalogers that goes into every record and puts G in the audience level. Even if it's incest, rape, murder, mayhem, they go through and put a G in every time. And I've tried repeatedly to get that to stop. And so I think this is a ways away from our group, but we'll see where it goes.
Oh yeah, and this this could be just a huge umbrella of stuff, and I think we would be well advised to only use it for what we want to use it for, and that'll all have to be determined at some point.
And definitely your cautionary note to not remove any of the 3 XX fields by any of our catalogers, because certainly we don't know what role those fields might play in the future.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we're almost through our agenda. We have a couple of minutes left here for these two. One being any kind of Q&A, general cataloging questions anybody has, as well as we've talked about a couple of training ideas that are forthcoming, but we always like to hear from everybody if there's any particular training that they would like to see, whether it be on any particular mark fields or fixed fields or ISBD punctuation. Whoever gets to do that training, that's fun. I say sarcastically. To any kind of, what do I do in this situation when I have to make a judgment call? You know, anything that anybody feels that maybe they're not as strong in a particular area, and so they'd like to be have some training in any particular area, please let us know. And if nothing comes to mind right now, you know, send me an email. I'm cataloger@bakerlib.org right here. If you at 3 a.m. come up with a brilliant idea for training that you benefit from, feel free to send me an email. I will not get it at 3 a.m. though.
Related to diversity of training, the mentors have discussed how do we motivate some of the less dedicated or the less talented catalogers to both do those trainings and to attend meetings such as this. I see the names that are here. Everyone is, these are all, I think, dedicated catalogers, but we have an awful lot of catalogers that should be listening to these and should be doing the trainings. And if anyone out there who's sitting in on this meeting has an idea on how we can motivate more people to try to improve their cataloging through attending meetings and doing trainings, we'd sure appreciate it. Seems like the wrong people keep learning more and more, and yet we're dealing with about 20 catalogers that should be learning bits and pieces, and we can't motivate them. So, yeah.
Something that was demonstrated at the annual meeting was, John and Beth can explain more of this than I can, but something, some kind of training platform, as I recall.
Yeah, it's Niche Academy, and the State Library is getting a subscription to it. But SAGE is also considering getting their own license so that we can put up our own trainings. And if we do that, for staff, we can monitor who's attending the trainings, and it gives us the ability to monitor how many people are viewing the trainings and which particular staff members are. So I think it's going to be a nice resource. It's just going to depend on the price tag.
Mm-hmm. Niche Academy, yes, that's how you spell it, right? N-I-C-H-E, niche.
Mm-hmm.
That would be hopeful, and then to make a minimum, make a requirement for anyone who wants to retain their permissions. That would be a good way to make sure that they attend a certain number of trainings or that they can document them.
Yeah, and if the trainings are online, the flexibility of being able to do it within their own work schedule, I think is going to be an important piece. And we'll be able to tell how many catalogers are really watching the trainings.
All right. Well, it is 12:01. So it looks like I'm getting everybody out a minute late. I apologize. Thanks everybody for being here today. We'll have another meeting in 2 months at the beginning of August. And this meeting will be recorded and put up if anybody wants to go back and look through anything. I will send out an email to the whole CAT list. So hopefully those that weren't here can look through and catch up. If anybody else doesn't have anything, I'll go ahead and call the meeting. I move to adjourn. Does anybody second? Second. All right. Anybody opposed to adjourning? Heather, you are not opposed to adjourning. I know that for certain. All right. Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. We'll see you next time.
All right. Thanks a lot, John.
Take care.